Hey, welcome to this episode of Tithely Backstage. This is a podcast where our product team at Tithely puts together just some great content. We're talking all things churches and all things products. So joining myself, my name is Kasey. Today, our other hosts are John Holtkamp, the group PM, one of our group PMs here at Tithely, and then Dan, our fearless leader, the director of products here at Tithely. So we love these opportunities to jump in, have some conversation with the ultimate goal of providing you, churches, with valuable resources, valuable content as you go about your day to day. So every episode we talk through a different topic, but before we jump into that, we have a question off the top is what we call it. So we kind of quickly go around with this question and then we dive into our topic. So John, let's start with you. For the question off the top, the question is, what is your best overall presentation that you've seen, experienced, encountered, etc.?
So I got an odd one. Steve Jobs is probably going to be most people's go-to, and I'm not going to do that because of that. There's an awesome one that would probably be my first one that comes to mind. But honestly, for me, the one I'm going to go to is I'm not doing that.
I can't
you do it. You
Steve
take
Jobs now.
Yeah,
so,
you know what? You talk about
I'm
that.
gonna go Google while you're talking. I'm gonna go Google another speech, and I will be right back.
So the one I'm gonna use, so I don't steal Dan's, is it's Todd Howard. So Todd Howard leads. I'm nerd times two here, but Todd Howard leads at Bethesda, who makes the games like if you're at all into gaming, it's like your Skyrims, Elder Scrolls, Fallouts, and he gave this speech introducing Fallout 76, which by the way turned out to be a flop. But his presentation as he was walking around this round stage to a crowd, the passion for what he does, his understanding of what he does, and while he has these teams all around him building it, he knew exactly everything about everything going on, and it was like enraptured the crowd. Like they were so into it. So I love that speech, and even though things didn't pan out for the game, that almost made it even more like great for me. That like he had this deep passion, and he was able to kind of dig the game out of where it was. So, well, I know that doesn't apply to everyone here because probably most listeners, watchers, whatever, aren't even into gaming. It was really cool to see, and I think anybody could appreciate the presentation he gave of that game.
Okay.
So good.
All right. Since I can't use Steve Jobs, which is arguably the best speech ever, when he talks about either the iPod, which was like 1,000 songs in your pocket, or the iPhone, which kind of blew people's mind, right? I'm going to go to a classic speech. This was as a kid. I loved watching this speech. It's actually the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry the Fifth. It's amazing. And if you've ever heard like We Band of Brothers, basically Henry V is there and they're in this battle where they're outnumbered, 10-1, some crazy number. They're going to lose. And there's some people who want to go back to England. He basically gives this speech that, that there's a couple of us who will survive. And there's these epic parts where he's talking about, right. And like in the future, I'm going to say Christmas days, they'll show their sleeves and show their scars. And, men will think they're manhood sheep who did not fight with us on St. Crispin's Day. It's like this speech at the end of it. You're like, yeah. And so it's good stuff. It's just like a great speech. Go Google it. If you haven't watched the speech from St. Crispin's Day. It's an older movie. It was obviously a Shakespeare's play, but it was a great speech. It's phenomenal. So have either of you heard? Do either of you know what I'm talking about? Like,
I don't.
We have only uncultured people inside of
yes.
Tithely product. No Shakespeare fans.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, sounds great. I mean, you painted a beautiful picture there, Dan. Now I want to go and search that. But before this, I'd never heard of that. No.
I want to go fight with you, Dan. That's what I want to do. So yeah,
that is my favorite speech. It has been since I was 12 years old. So.
Well, I want to jump in now. We didn't talk about Steve Jobs. Since you didn't take it, there's a speech from Steve Jobs, and this maybe it's well known, maybe it's not. I don't know. Where it's much earlier on as he's coming into Apple, and like he's giving a presentation, and someone challenges him. And he comes back, like someone like in a Q&A challenges him, and he comes back and responds to them. And I think that it's just a genius example of the challenge was a true challenge to his character and what he had done. But the way he came back showed like how he understood everything he was doing and why he was still right, even though the challenge was not incorrect. And I think like it's a great example of even what I said about Todd Howard, of like really understanding what it is you're doing. And even last episode, we talked about personas, and like you need to understand a 360-degree picture of what you're doing. And that allows you to be able, someone can challenge you and can really challenge something you're doing. But as long as you understand the full picture, that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means this one angle may shine a bad light on one of the many facets, whereas all the other facets are correct. So I had to do Steve Jobs. Pass it back to you, Kasey. I apologize.
No, that's good. If I've kind of seen clips of that same interaction, John, I've seen that used as like the power of the pause as well. That when Steve Jobs kind of presented this difficult question, there's this pressure, right? A lot of us have like been in ministry before, kind of pastoral positions, so like kind of used to like kind of speaking, public speaking, that whole thing. But there's this pressure of like I just got to talk fast and answer. Mm-hmm. But in that particular example, like he takes the time, I think he goes over, unscrews his water bottle, takes a sip, thinks about it, and then gives a very well-worded, elegant answer. And so, yeah, just like the power of the pause. And I'm going to kind of cheat here. I'm not going to use Steve Jobs, but just Apple in general. I'm a big Apple fan. Just of the different products. Part of it is just once you get in the ecosystem, you're kind of done for. You have to commit, if you will.
So true.
But they do twice a year presentations. One is on software in the spring, and then in the fall it's their hardware, like the new MacBooks, iPhones, etc. And I've always enjoyed those. I mean, Tim Cook is not as good of a presenter as Steve Jobs for sure, but I do like that they kind of during these presentations. The production values through the roof, of course, but the people doing the presenting are the actual people like involved in the day to day. So it's kind of fun to kind of like see this person, and you could tell that this is maybe their first time being recorded in this way. But I've always appreciated those Apple events, and I look forward to them every year. Super fun, and kind of especially in the world of software to kind of see what they build and why. Yeah. It's really fun, super interesting.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So fun to kind of discuss this stuff. And now to get into our topic, and of course this relates a little bit, our topic for this episode is Tithely Next. And Tithely Next are these events that we put on as a company, going over like what's coming up, some new feature updates, kind of reviewing some of the things that we've built and really highlighting some really cool elements of our business, etc. that we do roughly 3 to 4 times a year, obviously depending on calendar and all that. So let's jump into it. The goal of this episode is just to kind of talk about Tithely Next and dive into some topics. So first of all, maybe to start with you, Dan, maybe unpack a bit of the history of Tithely Next, kind of like how it came to be and some of the evolutionary growth of these events.
Yeah. So, man, it's weird being at a company like Tithely that's just fast moving and now being kind of one of the old timers here, because it hasn't been that long. I've been at Tithely for about 4 years. And when I came on, we were really ramping up our product team. We were kind of forming that for the first time, but then we were also adding a lot of new devs. And so we had all this work. We were launching a new product called messaging, and we were kind of sitting around saying, how do we launch this? Right. Because we want to, and so there's this idea of, I remember one guy was like, we'll just call it a product update, and we'll put it out in the newsletter. I just said, man, that sounds very anticlimactic. You know, we put in years of work and time and energy and sweat, blood, and like, here's the product update. And so we were like, well, we have to brand it. Let's just give it a name. And so we kind of had a couple different ideas for names, but we finally landed on Tithely Next. And I remember I got to go in and do the first, logo on that. And it started out then, right? And the first Next event was in this guy's apartment in LA. And I mean, small little room, like small. So we shoved Dean and Frank into this room, put a bunch of cameras on them. There's like this faux wood wall. It's like super dark. So it looks like we're like in a hostage negotiation. And there Dean and Frank are like giving the updates. I think we had like a few thousand people jump in. And each time we just kept iterating on it. Trying to make it more interactive with people. I mean, we now have tens of thousands of people who watch this Next event. We have thousands of people who tune in live. It's wonderful. And it's our chance to really publicly show what we've been working on, why we've been working on it. So rather going back to the beginning, we could just put an email out and say, hey, here's the new things we built and launched. But it's so much funner to get to spend time, do some giveaways, make it an event. That's kind of a little bit of just a Tithely ethos. Is we like to make everything a big deal if we can, and we get to serve churches, which we love. And so rather than just throwing something out there, we decide to package in this next event. And so I think we're coming up on 6 or 7 now, our 6th or 7th event, and it's just been wonderful over the last couple of years to see these things go live.
So a question I've never gotten to ask, so we get to hear this live, Dan, because I'm very curious about it. As Tithely Next came up, we were trying to figure out what to call it, right? And then I remember hearing it's going to be called Tithely Next. So we were already talking about Steve Jobs here, right? So the Next is like the device, obviously Steve Jobs was involved with as he exited Apple before he came back into Apple. And you have this like cube which says Next on it. And I posted that inside a channel, like, why aren't we using this logo? And so we have like your Deans, your Franks, everyone, like no responses. I'm like, I don't think anybody understood that joke. Did you understand the joke as it went in there, Dan, or not?
I got the joke. I just didn't want to be sued by Apple. So
gotcha. No. Okay.
And so, but You're like, it just wasn't
funny. I'm just not going to tell you that joke.
Oh, so good. I think we've all been there, like posting something in a group and nobody responds. You're like, I mean, I thought that was funny. Did nobody else get that?
It was excellent.
Yeah.
That's where you just got to show it to your wife and get that, at least that courtesy laugh. That's typically what we have to do.
And a little bit of a filter, right? My wife, I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, I don't know about that. All right. Thank you. Good filter.
I do that. It doesn't work because we're both nerds. So we literally had a Next in our basement at the time. So like we're so nerdy, we had one in our basement. Whereas most people don't even know what it is.
You actually found one of those Nexts? You actually found one of those old computers? Wow, that's awesome, man. I think 99% of people would not know what a Next computer is,
which is the problem with the joke.
Is it Linux? Do they use Linux? This is going real nerd. Well, what do they use as the base? Could they write all their own base operating system?
Well, wasn't that in the Steve? Now we're going like deep down the path of like going down a rabbit trail here. But the whole point of it was that they were building an operating system with a fake device to be able to sell the operating system to Apple. Like the whole plan of what was happening, like that. There's a Steve Jobs movie that talks about this, and like the stage there where he's in Next going out of it. Oh, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
So he knew that Next, like Steve Jobs, absolutely 100% knew that Next was his way to get back into Apple. Like it was never planning on just making the Next computer its own thing.
That's how it was presented. I have no idea. I actually haven't read the Steve Jobs book yet, which is odd considering how much I love reading.
Oh, I got it. It's a big book. That book, man, there's a lot of book to that book. Yeah. Like I'm into big books, but I got some other stuff to read these days. So anyway, somebody put down in the comments, rate the book. Is it a 10? It's a 10. I probably ought to read it.
Yeah. I'd love to dive into that book too. I've heard people who have read it said it's a great read. It's a good read.
Yeah. I think he's very honest. Like, no more rabbit trails. We can't go to an Apple rabbit trail than a Steve Jobs.
That's right. Steve Jobs and Apple. All right. Back to Tithely Next. John, I know one of the things that kind of grew from some of the first iterations of Tithely Next to where we are now is that product managers like yourself used to do the filming. So just curious, actually, I mean, this extra question here. What was that experience like? Do you enjoy kind of reading and being filmed and all the process going around that? Or are you happy to kind of now offload that where the marketing team kind of really handles that piece of it and the newest Next events?
This is a great question. It probably depends on who you talk to. So I'm someone who loves presenting, over the years, just the things I've had to do running my own company, I started that process of having my own company, hating to be on stage, getting to the point where I love to be on stage presenting. So I love the presentation side of it. However, a lot of what I love about the presentation side of it is not using a teleprompter. It's knowing what I need to talk about and being able to talk about it organically. So the evolution of Tithely Next for me, as I was part of Tithely Next actually presenting, was, hey, like, it's too organic. Like I'm just in front of a camera winging this thing to, hey, start writing a script, but you just kind of need to give us a general outline of what you're going to say. That was my favorite stage where I could actually present. It felt great. And those were the presentations where the quality wasn't great, but like the actual, what I was saying and showing, there was passion there and there was a lot of excitement. And honestly, you could tell I got a lot of great feedback during that phase, even though the quality wasn't there. And I may not have even been saying exactly what I should have been saying, but then it evolved to something that was a lot more structured where, okay, now we have an exact script, you need to say it word for word. And as Dan can attest, I memorized that thing word for word. So a funny story is I remember being we recorded one of these at Dan's house in Dan's basement. And Justin Dean, head of marketing, was recording it. And I remember he was holding the script and I was up there with no script, no teleprompter, giving a 5-minute talk and word for word hitting it because I had memorized it because I'm an insane person. And I remember him looking down at the script and up at me like, what's happening right now? But like, I hate that. I want to be able to actually like say it real. So I'd say for me, the evolution was going from something where it's like, hey, wing this thing and have a good time, to a little more structure till now, hey, I'm going somewhere where it's an actual studio, lights are on me. Hey, I don't think John's the right person for this anymore. And now we're going beyond that. And while I will admit I was a little disappointed the first time I wasn't part of recording. It is completely the right thing to do. Like I'm still involved with the scripts. I check every script. I write most of the scripts and most of them are used word for word when I write. But man, it is a waste of my time to be memorizing something, going somewhere, traveling, doing all that stuff. So I love where we've landed. And so many things in any of our jobs are that. We're like, I'm disappointed too. Oh, wow, that was the right move. I have a lot more time to do the things I should be doing. So that was probably more details than you wanted, but a good idea of like what my journey has been like in the space of Next.
Yeah, it's been great to see, the evolution and growth of it. On more of like a kind of like maybe even like a silly note, for lack of a better word, my time at Tithely, a little over 2 years now, is that we've only done this once. So maybe I'm just going to harmless plug. Let's bring this back. Is that they gave like a dollar amount for all the Tithely team members to be able to order lunch and watch the Tithely Next together as like a company-wide event. I know as soon as you get like however many employees, we have like 200 as team members. That's a big thing, but that was just so fun to be able to like I got a cheeseburger, some French fries, chocolate milkshake, stayed under the budget, which is important, and was able to kind of like engage and watch Tithely Next, and it was a good time. So. I would love to see that be brought back. That's just my 2 cents, but it was a good time.
That's awesome.
And so would love to hear your guys' thoughts, and we're going to get into like some of like the value and like the intentional value that we provide churches with the Next events. But before that, I would love to hear, starting with you, John, what are some of your favorite elements of Tithely Next? Just like different pieces of it, different segments, even some of the preparation that leads up to it from a product perspective. What would you kind of highlight as some of your favorite elements of Tithely Next?
All right, so I'm going to touch on 2 of my favorite elements. One is those customer stories. This is something that's happened a lot more recently, but in the last Next we had a customer story on our pledge tool, and our pledge tool is something that I've had the opportunity to be involved with from like the start, like. A lot of the stuff in the pledge tool is stuff I got to dream through with the designer I get to work with, through working with the engineers, figuring out what's possible to having it launch. But like in that moment, seeing someone talk about the pledge tool in like a dramatic way, obviously like the video is super high quality with music showing like touch points, but like it's also a true story. We didn't make any of this up. And knowing like this thing that I have poured so much of my passion into, and it's the great thing about what we do here is my passion has gone into being able to help the church. So like there's that added piece. It was just this thing I got to build. That's one thing that it like is doing something cool, but the fact it does it for the church, multiply that by infinity, in my opinion. And it's so cool to see that and how something I was able to work on was able to help a church. And I was actually messaging with my designer, like messaging her, just like, are you seeing this? This is incredible. Like, remember you and I talking about this, this, and this as just like ideas. And now here it is, like getting to see a church say how it changed their church and how they're able to have this building. Like, oh my goodness, that's glorious. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna stop there. I talked a long time on that one, so I'll pass it from there. But like getting to see that and knowing, like being able to picture from the idea to now seeing it actually blessing a church was huge for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I might piggyback off that just real quick, and then would obviously love to get your thoughts as well, Dan. Prior to my current role, I was able to be involved with the messaging product at Tithely, and so obviously this is another what we term as like John-isms or like John Holtkamp sayings that we all kind of use because they're so wise and valuable. But like when we talk about our engineering team, like especially as product managers or junior product managers, we use the language a lot that again John coined of like we stand on the shoulders of giants. That like our software engineers do such good work. And one of those highlights, I think it was 2 Next events ago, was around messaging and blasts and text blasts and how this new startup church used it and it saved them all this time and effort to use this great tool. And it was just like a proud moment for me to kind of see this, be part of the next event, and then just get to champion the team of engineers that help build these new features and products being featured in this particular next event. That was a great moment. So yeah, transitioning over to you, Dan. Favorite elements of Tithely Next events, lead up, prep, segments of it, etc. Yeah.
Okay, our CEO and COO are just two of the most personable people in the world. If you've ever been one-on-one with Frank, and so there's a little element of like next event where it's like our churches are just hanging out with them, and I love that. And it's just you never know. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to be said. And so and that's even us. I'm from like the production side. There's just this element of unknown just because you're getting both of them. And they're just incredibly good friends. And so they'll joke and they'll have a good time. And so I think one on the first event, like Dean mentioned, like golfing and golf balls. And like since then, like if you tune into a next event, you're going to probably see that we're going to give away some golf balls. And Dean's an avid golfer, so is Frank. And just like, man, who knows what's going to get added in to these things. As far as like some memories, or what are some of the highlights for me, is we really started capturing a lot of our church's stories. And so if you get to talk to the staff here at Tithely, most of them were working at churches or go to churches. And so the mission really is centered for us, like here, like we get to serve and work with churches. And that is a delight. It's wonderful to get to do that day in and day out. And so getting to see these stories of these churches that we're helping, whether they're buying their first building or they're a church plant, or then maybe their church has been around for a while. They just needed a way to connect to their members. They end up using the church app and find out what a great experience that can be. And but seeing these stories has definitely been a highlight as far as that goes. And then there is an element, and we just do this purposely. Software is it's right. There's a ton of people you'd never get to meet. Making it happen. That's our dev and engineering product team, right? You're not going to spend time, and we wanted a way to celebrate their work. Again, these are people who could go work almost anywhere, right? There's a lot of different tech companies. There are probably even some tech companies that pay a bit more, right? Because we're serving the churches. We try to stay competitive. And so getting a moment to say and to celebrate them and their accomplishment and what they've worked on is just, it's a big part of what the next event is for us internally. Getting to say, man, we have been working for sometimes months, even years on building these features or these new products, and getting a big moment to kind of push them out is special. And so those are kind of the highlights of the next event. So Dean and Frank, stories and celebrating those new wonderful features that we're pushing out for our churches. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And especially the golfing theme that has kind of woven its way into everything. I love it. My family and I live in Edmonton in Alberta, Canada. So, we're buried under snow half the time of the year. But when we moved here, I wanted to reach out and connect with some local Tithely churches. And so reached out to Justin Dean, the head of marketing. And what did he send me to then bring as like a gift was Tithely branded golf balls. So that was a fun moment. No, this is so good. So one last question on this, that we'll kind of talk about transition a bit here. But maybe if you guys have a great behind the scenes story, like something that if the church has tuned in to a Tithely Next event and it seems like polished and well done, but man, behind the scenes, like this was going on or this was going on or whatever it might be, any stories like that come to mind? Again, like Tithely Backstage, like what was going on backstage at these Tithely Next events? It'd be a fun story to share. John, if you have one,
there has been a
go for it, Dan.
There has been a Tithely Next event that has been erased from everything. We have scrubbed that thing so hard. So I don't even know why. Sometimes, and you're in church production. It's for all the people who you go in every Sunday and you work on the mics and the screens and all of that. It's like everything comes in batches. It's not like one thing goes wrong. It's like everything goes wrong. And I think it was 2019. No. It was like 2021. Was it Christmas of 2021?
Sounds right.
No, it was Christmas of 2020. Okay. We were going to do a special launch. We were launching this really neat product. It's loved. It's called Media. And we're like, let's do Apple has this, one last thing. It was like, let's have this one last thing this year. This amazing Next event. And just everything went wrong. Like, nobody's fault. It just all went wrong. Like, from how it was being recorded to people, you can't hear them, to they showed the video, and the video was like nobody could hear the video. So I had like worked really hard on this video, like showing Media. And so like for a week, I was like trying to piece this thing. I would do the shooting and the editing, and like they showed the video. I think there's like no sound. So I was watching the screen and just seeing random images popping up. And it's just like, this doesn't make any sense. And then like Dean and Frank, like they were kind of going in and out as far as their video. And so it was rough. It was really, really, really rough as a Next event. And so we learned from that, and we have not repeated that. But oh my god, it was one of those things. It was just a landslide. I remember because I remember I was driving at the time, and I remember there comes this point where you're like, oh, when the first thing goes wrong, you're kind of like, oh man, I hope we can, let's recover. And then by like the 10th thing, you're like, okay, this is the thing now. We just got to roll with it.
Yeah. When do you just call it, right? When you just like, yeah.
But it was good. Again, one thing I love about, Tithely is we can kind of laugh at ourselves. And we put out this hilarious video that just basically kind of, right, we were taking a dig at ourselves as far as how it went, and oh man, that thing brings so much joy. But yeah,
have you seen that, Kasey? The video making fun of ourselves?
I don't think I have actually.
Oh man, if you got to dig that up, Dan, if you know where it is, because it's like the video. It was worth the pain. That video is so funny.
Yeah. I mean, it was hilarious. So yeah. So as polished as our Next, like you see a Next event now, I mean, you behind the scenes, right? There's this big crew. There's like people who are like counting down marks. There's like probably close to 10 people who are taking care of lighting, different camera angles, mixing in the back. I mean, it is a production as far as that goes. I mean, we spend months, editing videos, getting everything ready. That one, we learned our lesson. And, we got to grow in that moment. It was a growing moment.
Oh, so good. And John, yeah, same question for you. I mean, maybe it's just like everything that Dan mentioned, but have there been any stories or examples or anything that stood out kind of like, again, that theme of Tithely Backstage? As we're looking at next events for this episode, anything that kind of stands out of like, oh man, the behind the scenes, the prep leading up to this event, this and this happened, anything along those lines?
Yeah, with something both of you brought up as your favorite elements was being able to celebrate the teams that worked on this. And it's true. Most of the stuff you see here, it's been worked on for 6+ months. And I mean, like, these teams have been focused on this for 6+ months. And oftentimes it feels like you're landing a rocket on the moon as you're coming up on Next, of like getting everything finalized. It's not you're not rushing anything out, but you're just finishing up these projects, getting to a point where you know how Frank and Dean can talk about the projects as they're talking about them. So being able to see the engineers celebrated. And there was one Next where our engineer, who's actually been at Tithely longer than any of us, he actually worked on our giving platform really early on, Brad. Dean, I believe, specifically talked about Brad and the way he was able to work with another engineer, Keithan, and the way he mentored him up and like got to the point where they're able to do what they're doing now. And I think it was talking about our pay product and what they were able to build together. But just hearing that, not just celebrating the product they were able to build, which that's a lot. Like, even to hear that for an engineer is great, but to be able to hear them talked about by name. And I mean, I would say probably 2 minutes were spent just talking about their story. Like, that was incredible. Nothing has ever happened on Next. Like, I told you about how cool it was seeing that story, but nothing has happened on Next has been better for me than getting to see those two engineers put on a pedestal in front of everyone to show just how much we care about the people here at Tithely, and to like really humanize, because it's so easy to get, maybe you're frustrated about something, you're forgetting there's people behind the scenes, and these are two people and their story being told about like, this product is what it is because of the journey these two people have been on and the passion they have for the church. So man, meant a lot to me, and I love that story.
Oh, that's so good. Again, like we were saying before, like, we have amazingly talented and gifted engineers that we get to work with. And so to see them valued in their work, kind of shown off, kind of show and tell, if you will, is always a great moment on the product team. Transitioning a bit to Tithely Next and kind of some of the value that we're seeking to provide churches. Dan, would you mind kind of walking us through just some of the different segments that make up a Tithely Next event? Like I know we do like some product highlights and some others, but like what are kind of those core pieces that Next events seek to deliver in some different ways?
Yeah, so Tithely really, as a company in our DNA, we just wanted to serve churches well, and we're kind of the new kids on the block, and God just was in our heart to serve and love churches. That was really blessed, and so now we were like the new kids on the block that nobody knew about. To now we work with around 37,000 churches, and those are churches who want to work with us. So they've plugged in their giving or they're paying a subscription. So those are churches that we're genuinely partnering with. So it's not, some churches on an email list or something like that. I mean, these are churches that we serve, we get to serve daily. It's It's such a monumental thing to think about, just the number of churches. And so with the Next event, we love getting to highlight them through the videos. So a big part of the Next event is showing these really well done videos. Some of these churches, most of these churches, when they get the video, they're so well done, they show them to their church just because they're just, we spend lots of money to make sure they're just done with just the utmost of excellence. So that's one segment. The other is getting to spend time with Dean and Frank, right? We do not. It's interesting. Dean and Frank are very hands-on. They love to spend time with our customers. They love to spend time on the product. They just do. That's just a part of the company that they have built. Is they don't really have a standoffish approach. Like, man, if you want to, hang out with them, then that's their deal. Maybe now I think hopefully the people who are listening to this podcast, you've maybe been at an event or been somewhere they're at. It's just fun. And so the Next event is that opportunity to kind of get to hang out with Frank and Dean and see their big vision for how they want to serve churches. And then lastly, it's kind of broken up into showing off what we've built and what we've done and what we've improved over the last, several months. So we're always shipping and building new things and improving our system. Or, recently we've been able to acquire new companies that this is a big deal, and really partner with these companies. Right when we see a company that's doing what we're doing, and we feel like they can be a good fit for our customers, we feel like Tithely can be a good fit for them. Man, we like to see if we can join forces, and that's happened a couple times. And so just it's been fun. And so that third kind of part of Tithely Next is showing off, hey, what have we been doing? What are we building? What's kind of the road ahead look like? And, an hour goes by pretty quick with those events.
That's right. Yeah, and I know like an element that I love as well, kind of like more like kind of the introductory part, is they always do gifts or like raffle items, if I'm getting that right. Kind of like you enter it in as you sign up. They do drawn items. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Drawn items. So golf balls, of course, a recurring theme. You might notice golf-related prizes. I think that there is a prize. I don't know if this is one-off or if this is a regular thing, but like you get to go golfing with Dean and Frank. Am I accurate in that? Is that sometimes that's a prize?
I think they went to Torrey Pines, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, that's a beautiful golf course right on the coast. So yeah, there's some amazing places.
And I know prizes we've done in the past as well, which is really cool and just speaks to all of our heart. Like so many Tithely team members, either currently or in the past, are very involved in kind of vocational ministry as well. Mm-hmm. And so we have this heart to serve the local church. And one of the things that as Dean and Frank and the team kind of got their heads together of when we're doing these prizes, like what actually provides like great value to churches. I feel like pastors are so often like overworked, so that taking time to rest is a difficult thing to do. So let's provide that as a prize. I think it was like a weekend getaway, but it's like, hey, like a pastor and their spouse can kind of get away for a weekend, like on Tithely, to kind of like put that cost forward to them to be able to do that or to cover that. So I thought that was so cool to kind of see that in Next events. Like, hey, we value you. We know that this has been a very stressful season, especially kind of coming out of lockdowns and stuff. Go away for a weekend, rest, recuperate, pray, breathe, and be rejuvenated for a new season of ministry. So I've always loved those kind of pieces of it. And I know those are like the kind of the secondary, like you mentioned, Dan, those three big pieces that we tackle every Next event. But those kind of secondary elements provide huge value to, and I think speak to the intent behind the next events. Yeah, John, just want to give you time as well. Like any specific element that you're like, man, I love this piece of it, this segment, the value that provides churches that we haven't already chatted about.
And personally, being in product, the thing I really love to see is always just getting to talk through the new thing rolling out. Like we get to, in the space we're in, not only am I focusing on the thing that I'm working on with my teams, but I am very close to what every single person's working on. And I know the time they've poured into it over the past few months, their teams, as well as just them personally. So getting to see that person celebrated, and something you don't see is we have our own Slack channel, and it'll be going on company-wide as well as within our own teams of those teams celebrating each other. And it's really cool to see that, of just like, oh man, like one of our PMs here, my PM product manager, PMs here, Therese, she's great about celebrating everyone. And so just seeing her call out like exactly what that person did, it's a really cool moment for encouragement. But to have that on so many different levels, because there's the whole company versus even being able to go into the engineering teams afterward and saying, guys, you did such a great job. Did you see that video about how Pledge went? Man, what an incredible way we executed that, and we're able to help churches. So absolutely that element.
So true. Yeah, Therese has that clear gift of encouragement. She just lightens up every Zoom space.
Why haven't we got Therese on this one? Like she's amazing.
Oh, we'll get her in the schedule.
Okay.
100%.
I mean,
we're going to get her in here.
Me and John are okay, but let's get Therese on here. Like, amazing.
So good. And another episode, another time, would love to like share some examples of getting to meet Therese in person as well. Mm-hmm. And then, just to kind of wrap up here, sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear my kids in the background.
Yeah.
Nature
got real.
Actually,
we all got kids, don't we?
Yeah.
I have 6, but I just barricade my door and throw out a candy bar every once in a while, and we're good. That's what I do.
So good. But I do love that. Just a quick side note, and then we'll got one last question for us here. I love that culture of Tithely. I think one of my first all-in-team meeting that we have on a monthly basis of the whole team getting together, Frank, our COO, was presenting, talking through something, and one of his kids kind of jumped up on his lap and kind of like hit his keyboard a little bit, and it was just like, it wasn't like this bad thing. He just like let his kid sit there and went, kids, am I right? And proceeded to kind of present and talk. And there is that reality of like, we value families and kids. So even as like my toddler's coming into my office now, it's always a good time. I love it.
So many kids. We love it.
So many kids. So kind of our last question here around Tithely Next is for each of you. We'll start with you, John. What would you say to a church that maybe hasn't tuned into a Tithely Next before, that they're hearing about this, or maybe they've seen some kind of promotional materials before, but just haven't taken that step to register and to tune in? What would you say of kind of like the value that this brings to them and their team, some of the overall learning and equipping? What would you say?
I'm going to take it a step away from Next just to give an example of how this applies to anything, because maybe it'll help you understand in the context outside of Next. But for instance, let's go back to Apple. Let's go full circle here. As a developer, so I started out in the development world. They have the Apple Developer Conference, and they have all these little different like sessions where they talk about different products, and you don't have to go to those. You can continue as an Apple developer without understanding that. But if you're in those, you understand so much better how the product works, because they're telling you everything about what's coming. And that way you're able to better use the product you're developing for, and you're able to save yourself time, and you're able to help the people you're working with your product better. In the same way, I think coming to Tithely Next has the most value because it gives you an idea of what's coming down the pipeline. Is it a necessity? No, you can survive within our ecosystem just fine. It'll do amazing. You could thrive without ever watching one, but it gives you insight into what you can do with our platform and what you'll be able to do in the near future with our platform to really serve the people at your church better. And I think that's the number one reason to do it. And it really is easy to extrapolate out from us to anything else or anything you're used to back into us of understanding how that can help you.
Yeah, I would just say we're a company that's really focused on equipping and serving churches. And so what we do is we invest in our products. We're always shipping and putting out a lot of new stuff. And it's just a great way to stay on top of what we're building. We're building it for you. And so jumping in, we try to make it a fun hour. There's some giveaways, but it's a great time to see how can you use the software to really save time so you can focus on ministry, the people ministry. And so that's just a big heartbeat of ours. So I would say, come on in, see what we're building. We're building it for you. And hopefully what it can do is save you time and energy so you can focus on those people tasks at your ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just kind of echo that same stuff, that if you haven't dove into Tithely Next before, like Dan mentioned, it's a fast hour. It's super fun. It's engaging. You kind of get to see like the Dean and Frank kind of do their thing as well. And it just provides value. So like you can kind of gather your team together, order some pizza, some Starbucks coffee, whatever you want to do. Tim Hortons if you're in Canada like I am, and kind of dive in. It's you won't be disappointed. It's a good time. Awesome. Well, that does wrap up this episode of Tithely Backstage as we dove in a little bit to Tithely Next events and unpacking that a little bit. And so we would love for you to continue to engage. And so wherever you're tuning in, whether it's over YouTube or a different podcast provider, please like, subscribe, follow, all that great stuff. Leave a comment. If you have some questions, put those in the comments and we'll do our best to kind of bring some up and answer them in future episodes. We'd actually love to do that. But once again, thanks for joining us and we'll see you next time.